This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Catherine, Robert, Amelia, and I are talking about making sure that your character is up to the challenges you throw at her through your plot. So, Robert, you were thinking about this, so why don't you take us a little deeper into the topic?
Yeah, I can't remember what prompted it, but it was something to do with maybe something I was reading or watching at the time, and it took me back to that prompt that we're often given, which is, put your characters in a tree, set the tree on fire, and throw stones at them, and then invent ways to get them out of that situation. And metaphorically, of course, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to, what's the point of a story if there's no conflict? But the but is, the danger is that you make a character a Mary Sue type of character that can achieve anything, and so they breeze through, they handle every conflict, and nothing goes wrong. Which I definitely fell into the trap of that as a new writer many years ago, because you want to show your readers that you're clever, that you've come up with these ways that they can solve this problem. I can't hurt my character. That wouldn't be nice. Or there's the other way around, where they get thrown challenges that are so ridiculously unsolvable, but then they find a way to do it with no history of ever doing anything like that before. So it's not that they're necessarily Mary Sue, but and it may have been very painful for them to do that, but it became difficult to suspend disbelief because it was so outside of their world, and obviously no foreshadowing either. So then you've got that issue where it can even lean into that Deus Ex Machina style. Which is usually an external rescue, but it could appear that way if it's an internal, heroic act. So I guess I'm looking at how do you make that conflict appropriate to the character and the genre, and steer a reasonable line that makes it exciting for the reader, but not so ridiculously unbelievable, or the other way around, not particularly entertaining and exciting.
Yeah, definitely. One of my, the first question I ask when a writer needs to develop a character is, what does this character need to do? I call it putting what before who, so if
yes,
you're writing, your genre is action adventure, and you need this character to be able to, swing from a rope and go off a cliff over a waterfall and survive, and shoot a coconut off of a tree or something. We need physical strength, right? What does this character need to do? We need physical strength. We need marksmanship. We need weapon skills. We need tenacity, perseverance, courage, a whole bunch of different skills and traits. And so if you aren't establishing who your character is and what your character can do from the very beginning, so that when these events come up, it is plausible and we can suspend disbelief and enjoy the ride, then you've failed very early in your manuscript to develop this character and present her in such a way to the reader that those conflicts and her ability to handle them actually make sense in the story you've created.
Right. So I asked the question first, and it sort of connects to the stakes then, doesn't it? Which then is what relates us directly back to genre, because the stakes are going to be very genre appropriate.
Right.
Yeah. So if it's action adventure, there's going to be life, death, or some form of saving something at stake. Whether it be one person or many people. If it's a romance, then it's going to be the relationship that's at stake. So there will be different things. And that, which is why often we look at romances to characters who are undergoing some form of personal evolution, because they can't stay together unless one or both change in some way, shape, or form. That being the conflict. Well, otherwise it wouldn't be a story. Got together, fell in love, found that they were perfectly matched. End.
Right. And we talk so often about genre fiction because the elements and the examples become readily apparent to us.
Right.
But the same applies for contemporary fiction or literary fiction, where things that are character driven, you still need to ask, what does this character need to do? What does this character need to endure to reach the end of the story, to survive the climax and to have a change? So maybe the character is enduring heartbreak, but what is the form that heartbreak takes? What kind of role does this character play in his world? What career, how much family, what kind of friends, what kind of social life or nightlife? So all of these choices we make about who our character is are shaped intimately by what this character does, which is about our plot, which is about the sources of conflict that our character is going to encounter on this journey. So in something character-driven, we might not need a skill like weapons training, right? But we'll need some traits like maybe selflessness or selfishness or self-preservation or, generosity or, maybe this character needs to be the best of best friends, right? And so how does that factor in? What is this character willing to sacrifice to be that best of best friends, to go through this conflict?
And then if they don't have that or have that developing, then we have to find some kind of mechanism within the story that they can acquire that and not acquire it instantly, which is one of the other things that irks me. I remember reviewing a particular young adult book, which will remain nameless, where the protagonist at some point toward the end of the story was suddenly given a gun and was able to dispatch antagonists pretty readily, despite never having fired a gun before in his or her life. So it was, at that point, oh, come on, this is now just too much. I can't take it anymore. And it wouldn't have taken too much to have inserted maybe a time where he or she had been forced to pick one up and do something with it, and maybe even fail at the time. It doesn't, and it's not that they need to have been turned into a sharpshooter. So the same with the best of friends thing. It may be it's a situation where they didn't have that personal skill, but then they were thrown into a situation where they had one of those epiphanies that turned them around, and then later on in the story that becomes key.
Right.
So and then we see that also a lot in younger stories or coming of age, where there are these training montages where you need the skill acquisition in order to make the climatic moments more believable.
Right. Yes, those are the apprentice stories, like the Karate Kid or Star Wars, where you see the skill acquisition, or Kung Fu Panda, another one of my favorite apprentice master stories. Yes, the mistake a lot of writers make, which you were describing there, Robert, is that they are unfamiliar with Chekhovs Law, which is if you introduce a gun in Act 1, it has to go off in Act 3. But what we need to do is reverse engineer that. So if in Act 3 you need this character to fire a gun, as in the YA example you gave, Robert, then you had darn well better introduce that gun in Act 1. Show us that skills acquisition, and it might not be a montage of apprenticeship. It might be a flashback of backstory to shooting pop bottles in the woods with dad or grandpa or something, so that you see, okay, this person has handled a gun. This person has some target experience, still, if you're taking down a human being, or, okay, Like,
well, this is where you have to put all the puzzle pieces together, right? So we had an episode a while ago. It was a long time ago. But I guess last summer, about starting with the end in mind, right?
Right.
And I think this is where, if you're starting with the end in mind, it's a little bit easier to get this in the first couple drafts. And if you don't, then you have to go back through and figure out how the puzzle pieces fit together. Because you may have a really great character moment with Grandpa teaching you how to shoot in the backyard. Maybe you're killing squirrels or something. I don't know. So that you kind of have that kind of mentality. And then that puzzle piece lines up with the end, right? But your readers don't know that until the end. And so it's like being able to insert the puzzle pieces that you need in order to make the full picture. They don't all necessarily line up exactly. You don't have a straight through line, right? Different things can attach to different things in order to make the entire picture eventually make sense. I was thinking in my brain as you were talking about this about Moana. Have you guys seen the movie Moana?
No.
If you're listening to this podcast, you are probably a writer, and you've maybe heard me talk about the Storyworks reading series. It is the new branch in the Storyworks family tree. It is a literary journal podcast. That's right, a hybrid, a literary journal for your ears, with a print anthology at the end of the year of the best of the podcast. I am open for submissions, and I want to see your best prose right now. I am taking both fiction and creative non-fiction. You can read the guidelines and submit your work at storyworkspodcast.com/submit. What are you waiting for? It's time to see your stories published and sit on the other side of this microphone from me. Have a conversation about your storycraft.
It's a Disney movie. Okay. Well, I'll keep the example brief. But there's a moment where she fights a bunch of coconut pirates on a ship, right? And almost exact same animation of her getting to the ship and sliding down the ship and hitting the coconuts happens in the beginning sequence when she's running through the island explaining why she wants to go out to the sea so much, and she grabs a leaf and she slides down a tree. So you get her athletic ability, and you get the fact that she's spent her entire life shelling coconuts because that's what they use, right? For everything. And then so when the coconut pirates show up and she defeats them all with an oar, you don't go, now, really, would she be able to do that? Right?
Right.
But those are puzzle pieces that don't make sense until you have both sides.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well
like in the Hunger Games, where the opening Katniss is hunting for food with a bow and arrow. Right? So later when she's using a bow and arrow and there are human beings involved and such, and we understand the situation she's in and the stakes she faces and why, until that final pinnacle moment, she has to actually harm people and such. We get it. We're saying yes to it. When I'm coaching clients all the time, I'm reminding them that you need reader buy-in. You need the reader saying yes every single step of the way. Yes, I'm interested in this character. I like this character. And yes, that might be a questionable choice, but I understand in the circumstances you've presented to me, in the character's personality you've given me, and in this world you've created, I understand why, so I'm saying yes to it, even if it's morally reprehensible, even if I would never make that choice myself. So reader buy-in, that yes doesn't mean we agree with or like everything that happens, but we get it, we're invested in it, and we're following it through to the next step in the plot.
Yeah, it's kind of like that math problem. We logically can get to the same place that the character did. And even if we, like you said, even if emotionally we may not agree with their choice, as long as we get it and we're willing to follow them through, that's what matters.
And the leap has to be believable. So in that mathematics example, it's not going from simple additions or times table to string theory in 2 pages. So it's appropriate to the overall journey. Just harking back to the Hunger Games example as well. You know, that scene in the woods there probably does triple duty as well, because she's not just hunting, she's actually crossed a boundary. She's had to go under a fence. She's a rebel, it's been established, and Gabe is with her, so there's the romantic interest as well, and they have some even, I think, minor conflict or discussion or something, or, you know, some debate about something while they're there. So there's a huge amount of establishment going on there that isn't just that she's got the skill of with a bow and arrow. Clearly that's the most conscious one.
Right.
But the unconscious one that makes a lot of sense is that not long after that she offers herself as a substitute tribute. Now, that wouldn't have been as believable if we hadn't already known that she was prepared to break the rules and be a rebel and stand up and, you know, be a bit mouthy.
Right, and she'll do anything she has to do for her family. You know, she is the family's breadwinner, so to speak, because she's putting food in her mother and sister's bellies. And so, exactly, Robert. We need every scene to do more than one thing. So while that scene is on the surface showing us she has a skill with the bow and arrow, it is also developing her character, showing us these inherent qualities that are critical to the story and to her character arc, and, you know, triple duty, introducing this romantic interest. Yeah. And we all should strive for that with every scene. Don't just check one box. You know, we've got character, we've got plot, we've got theme.
Yeah, so maybe as Catherine says, it comes down to there isn't really a method for getting this sort of middle line between what's too easy and what's unbelievable, but it's putting all the puzzle pieces together in a way that tricks the reader constantly into suspending disbelief.
Right,
and so you're doing that in multiple ways.
Too.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if you have all of these puzzle pieces that in the reader's mind don't seem to connect into your climax, and then all of a sudden you're like, bing, bang, boom, boom, boom. That's where you get the surprising. Because a lot of times, especially depending on your genre, the ending is known. Like, hard known.
Yes.
Like, here comes the bad guy, they're going to die, or they're going to be defeated. Or, you know, like, we know ahead of time.
Yeah.
But if you've given your character all these skills, or you've developed them throughout the book in ways that don't seem to add up, but then at the end you show how they logically add up together, I think that's where you can, when you know the end first, you can disassemble your puzzle into some really interesting blocks that then work together. So
those are the stories I love, Catherine. Yeah, those are the ones I love. The one, you know, where you get the goosebumps at the end. You go, oh, I knew it had to end that way, but that was delicious.
How in the heck does that? Oh my gosh!
Oh no, that's what made me think that I could never write stories, because I just never understood. I just thought that came out. That's how they wrote them, you know.
Right.
And you don't realise that how much blood, sweat, and tears and months of effort, sometimes years for some people, that goes into crafting a good story.
Yes. Yeah, and I think the mistake, kind of going back to the original question you posed, Robert, that writers make is they introduce something surprising at the very end, but it isn't inevitable because they haven't done the work of constructing all of those elements that build up to that moment in an effective and plausible way, you know, getting the reader buy-in throughout the journey. Thank you for listening to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. I hope you found the episode enjoyable, inspiring, and maybe even enlightening. If you did, please rate, review, and subscribe. Those ratings really help with the show's discoverability, and we would love to bring more writers into the roundtable conversation. Thanks again, and until next week, happy writing. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.